Oh my god, it's finally here. I have been waiting so long for this. New generation consoles and their unconventional looks might dominate the tech news cycle right now, but what is for me the weirdest looking, bizarre product to be released in 2020 is this absolute unit of a device, this tremendous chunk, this extraordinarily niche product that GPT has been building toward for literally years. This is the GPT Win Max. It is a laptop, I think. It is a handheld gaming device of a sort. It is a device trapped between two worlds and just a weird computer. Let's rewind for a moment just to catch everyone up to speed. Gamepad Digital, or GPT for short, is a Chinese company that made a name of themselves by making miniature computers, initially handheld and then straight up pocket laptops. GPT is right now one of my favorite computer makers, particularly because their improvement model over model is fantastic, and it is great to see them learn from their mistakes. And particularly because these are extraordinarily niche devices meant for what I feel are very specific use cases, in a world where everyone seems to be trying to make the next definite laptop or something. It is refreshing to see someone with such a different set of priorities. So far GPT has had mainly two product lines, the GPT Win line, which arguably put them on the map, DS-like mini handheld consoles that run Windows, and the GPT Pocket line of miniature laptops that looked like a MacBook, but you could literally store in like a coat pocket, as I did many times. I have done many videos on many of these devices in the past, so they're linked in the description and corner in case you need the context. This time they decided to do the very weird decision to fuse both lines into a fascinating, just weird product. And the result is something that takes some compromises to get there, but is ultimately probably my favorite GPT device so far, and probably the one I will personally use the most. So what makes this one special? Let's contextualize further. In the past, GPT tended to prefer ultra-low voltage, low TDP chips like Intel Atoms and Intel Celerons. This was a decision that was logical for several reasons. People tend to underestimate just how hot Intel or AMD x64 chips run to get any meaningful performance. If you ever wonder why both Apple and Microsoft are so desperate to get ARM working on laptops, this is why. x64 chips just run too hot for small devices. That has not stopped Intel from trying, and their low TDP system on a chip provides surprisingly good performance for day-to-day tasks. The performance was not fantastic for games, but it was okay for a lot of lighter indie games and some older ones with some tricks. This was probably why these were preferred by GPT and their ultra-compact machines, and they still could get pretty toasty and pretty loud. The original GPT Win was innovative, but could get pretty hot. The GPT Win 2 was an improvement with a better cooling system that could still get hot, but was not as uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the Pocket line of laptops went all in on an aluminum chassis rather than plastic, which means the whole device could act as an accidental heatsink of sorts, which was more acceptable for a device that was not meant to be handheld. My point is, even while using ultra-low power, low TDP chips, GPT was still always cutting it close in terms of cooling because x64 is a cooling nightmare. So it is a bit of a surprise to see the big boy GPT Win Max jump to what is a full-size, very recent laptop Intel system on a chip. Not only is it a huge increase in terms of performance, but also a rather substantial increase in heat output. And I'm just amazed at how many things GPT did well to make this work. The device is easily able to keep itself cool even at high TDPs thanks to a meaty dual fan system, and since only the top part of the device is metal, you still get a certain feeling of being a premium device without conducting all the heat to your hands while playing. In fact, the hands can be so effective that often my hands will get cold rather than warm due to the unfortunate position of the vents, and the device is pretty thick to accommodate for the cooling system, among many other things. But I will take a thicker device and some bent positioning shenanigans over a device getting too hot to hold. There was a compromise here, but a compromise worth taking. Also worth saying, higher TDP means more heat and less battery, so one of my favorite features is the fact that you can adjust the TDP in the BIOS among 3 levels or more freely with the right software. This gives the device a tremendous amount of flexibility that saves a lot of its shortcomings. I can choose a high TDP for a much shorter battery life, but then a much expanded roster in terms of games, or a low TDP for simpler games and longer battery lives. Playing around with this feature has made me extremely annoyed that this is not a widespread setting in laptops that is user reachable. Do not underestimate how much of a difference this can make. I too often make the mistakes of focusing too much on specs and too little on TDP. And the fact is, we have a meaningful increase in cooling. It was going to be difficult for GPD to upgrade this from the Win 2. And at a full 25 watts in raw CPU power, it can overtake better equipped machines. Comparing it with a more expensive laptop with a CPU from the same generation that is higher end but locked at a lower TDP, you can see the i5 coming ahead simply because it has a higher thermal budget. Now, it is not a secret that when you start getting to these higher TDPs, AMD has been making terrific advances with their laptop APUs, so I have to wonder, as everyone, why they ultimately went with an Intel part. Given that they apparently changed their opinion on this mid-development, I imagine they have a pretty good rationale for it. Performance, cooling needs, supply issues could all be included factors, but I do not have a clear answer at the moment. With that said, looking at the specs of this thing, it makes it one of the best laptops I own, so I started thinking that there was a genuine chance where I could use this as a gaming handheld and as a substitute for my laptop. I already have used GPT Pockets extensively while in conferences or so for writing scripts, managing with YouTube, team managing, but with this amount of power and its hybrid approach, there was a possibility for it being much more. However, when you take a very close look, you see a lot of places when they had to decide between these two identities, and they settled on just one. For example, in terms of input, they managed to find a surprising way to make both worlds work. The buttons are probably the best they have done all around in terms of feel, the stick finally clicks, not necessitating an external button for that, and over the side they included the customary switch that allows using the sticks as a mouse or a scroll wheel. Unlike other devices, to be honest, I switched the Sky to controller mode once and never touched it again, thanks to the inclusion of a really decent trackpad. While the positioning is a bit odd, it not only works well, but also supports gestures for stuff like scrolling, so honestly, I did not feel the need of using the sticks to navigate, and it is leagues better than any other mouse solution on GPT Pockets that I own. Then there's the keyboard. The keyboard is fine. I got used to the keyboard of the GPT Pocket, and with a bit of practice I can type quite effectively on this one as well. The keys on the top, however, draw me insane. I would have preferred something closer to the GPT Pockets, because it is so hard to accurately hit buttons here, and maybe it was meant to be easier to operate with your thumbs? I do not get it. There is, however, one keyboard feature that immediately put this ahead of the GPT Pocket series for casual work. Backlight! Finally, a backlight! This device really does have a bit of everything. Ports, there's so many of them. Freaking full-size HDMI, 2 full-flat USB 3.0 ports, 2 USB Type-C ports that both work as USB video output and charging ports. My, just how delightful. Also on one side is Gigabit Ethernet, which... what? This is one of those weird places where the laptop side won, because this inclusion is super useful when using this as a production computer and pulling stuff from a NAS or something, but it takes into my hand when I'm holding it as a gaming machine. Why? It's not terrible, I've gotten used to it, but it is weird because in general the Win 2 was an improvement in terms of ergonomics compared to the original Win, and this is a bit of a step back. Weird. Also, I would like to make it clear, this is a nitpick. I have put many hours on this device and I already got used to it. And then there's the screen. The screen is fine, it is an LCD panel with great colors and it is a touchscreen, but GPT had a unique challenge with the resolution. Pocket devices tend to sport closer to Full HD resolution to make their high-density panels more useful for production work, while Win devices tend to stick to lower resolutions to make it easier to run games at a native full-screen resolution with their integrated GPUs. And the GPT Win Max opted for that solution. This is a device with a weird-ass aspect ratio, but with a resolution low enough to give its GPU a chance. Absolutely the right decision to run some games. It is a bit of an annoyance how much it screws with the possibility of using this device for many productivity tasks like light video editing, but not everything can be a perfect compromise. Now I have talked a lot about the really impressive change in CPU power, so now let's get into the GPU. This i5 comes with integrated Intel Iris graphics. Intel Iris is one of the best GPUs Intel had to offer in terms of integrated graphics, at least until the eventual release of their new graphical architecture. It is tempting to ask if there's any way we could have gotten a dedicated GPU at this form factor, but given the immense heat and energy consumption involved in even the most basic PCs with dedicated GPUs, it seems that technologically this is just not possible. For the handheld, for now, it is all going to be about integrated graphics, which explains why other not market-ready experiments like Alienware Device, while coming from a heavy gaming brand, are still using integrated graphics. It is easy to read into labels like this and make some grand assumptions about performance, but again, there's a limit here in terms of heating for the whole chip, so what can we squeeze out of this device in full 25-watt mode? So let's start with some games that are arguably better enjoyed using the fantastic gamepad controls. Now, I am not going to lie, in my free time this device has mostly been a Genshin Impact machine. Genshin is an interesting case because, while surprisingly large, it is also being released on mobile with both 30 and 60 FPS options, but for some paradoxical reason does not support gamepad, meaning that options to play it on 60 FPS portably with a handheld are limited. So I was super pleased to discover that the game runs in 60 FPS at a full screen resolution on the GPD Win Max. This is running all lowest settings, but this is the full resolution, no scaling and TAA anti-aliasing, and it still looks pretty great. In a weird way, Genshin Impact is kind of the ideal game for this device, since the art style holds it very well at low settings. As I said, I have put 99% of my Genshin hours on this device, and it is currently my playstyle of choice. I had to use borderless Windows app to make this weird aspect ratio resolution work, but it looks great! However, it is a Unity game, which means no configuration files and no graphical tweaking, so how about we try something that is not in phones and can be graphically modified? So here's the excellent Sekiro, running in native resolution at a locked 30 FPS. While Sekiro drives me insane by not having a resolution scaler, which will be immensely useful in this sort of device, it does allow you to go into the configuration files and disable shadows and volumetric effects like fog, which are amazingly useful tweaks to get this working. Also worth noting, one of the disadvantages of this screen-weird aspect ratio is that not all games will work nicely with it, which means you will occasionally get cases like Sekiro with black borders, so the game essentially is running at 720p. Another interesting example is Devil May Cry 5. While this game is brilliantly well optimized and could quite probably do fine at a 30 FPS lock with lowest settings and a 50% resolution scaler, I wanted to see how far it could go. This year I made a video about how a new mod allows you to disable shadows, force low LOD models and do changes to illumination and other small details to get extra performance. And using those changes the game soars to a nearly stable 60 FPS, which is way more than I expected to get. It isn't a perfect lock, but it is way of a better experience than I had expected. Let's switch gears a bit and try some games arguably better enjoyed using a mouse and keyboard. While the freaking tiny number keys do make this difficult in a lot of games, it is still quite more doable than you would expect, but definitely a far cry from the excellent controller experience. Also, wait, is that Doom Eternal? I have mentioned in videos in the past my inability to get this game working on any Intel integrated GPUs, but now it's finally happening. Turns out, for some reason, Doom Eternal consumes way more RAM as VRAM on Intel HD rather than integrated AMD Vega, meaning that you need a lot of RAM to boost this game on Intel graphics. Weird. Since the GPD Pocket has an enormous 16GB of RAM, it just worked. And on lower settings and a 50% resolution scale, it did way better than I expected. For extra performance here, I'm using the Dev Console setting that disables shadows. I wanted to go full low spec on this game, but currently the last update broke the mod. However, I could still disable shadows using the locked Dev Console. In terms of performance, it was consistently over 30 FPS, which is a testament to both how much removing shadows can help and just how well this game can run in general. And considering how hard I was pushing the combat, this is a surprise. Another shooter that, even in performance mode, can be a bit heavier than you will expect on Intel graphics is the Halo Master Chief Collection of remake/remasters. I only managed to get any graphical tweaks working on Halo Reach, and this is Halo 2 that I'm playing, but on performance mode settings, and it did very well, as you can see. One thing that did cause some issues is that some games, like this one, can have pretty strong load stutters on Intel graphics, which can cause some strong gameplay interruptions, but apart from that, it works well. A big surprise was Apex Legends. I don't think I have ever tried an Intel-based integrated GPU that could run it satisfactorily. And now this is running in essentially a thicker 720p and it's absolutely playable. I did disable shadows with my own trick from the video I did in the past, which suddenly really made the game just playable, even in moments of great stress. Honestly, of all the tests I have done, this is the one that surprised me the most. So, while not cheap, although not extremely out of the way from what is essentially a super niche laptop, it is just powerful enough to play a variety of games if you're creative enough with settings and configuration files, earning it my official seal of certified low spec inside. Now, while the small screen and cramped keyboard might difficult its role as a gaming-ish laptop, it might work excellent as a docked workstation thanks to an unexpected addition. One advantage of going Intel rather than AMD is the addition of Thunderbolt 3. Now this is another mixed bag. There are two technologies in PC gaming that I'm personally frustrated about still not being mainstream. Virtual reality, which is getting cheaper but at a higher industry cost, and then there are PCIe enclosures for Thunderbolt 3. In theory, the idea is phenomenal. Thunderbolt 3 enables USB Type-C ports to have PCIe access, thus making them phenomenal for connecting productivity expansions such as faster Ethernet for working with a NAS, faster SSD storage for video editing, and yes, external GPUs. This tremendously exciting technology has been crippled by cost. Thunderbolt ports are still somewhat rare and usually present only on premium laptops. Because of this, it has become a very niche product meant for high-income enthusiasts, and therefore just a basic enclosure for Thunderbolt 3 can be hilariously unnecessarily expensive. When one of the cheapest options for a product comes from Razer, you really know you need some better entry-level competition. Still, I have gotten lucky a few times in the past with borrows or used devices, and I do own a couple of these enclosures. Some of the cheaper ones you see around do not support high-power charging while in use, so they only work in laptops where you can charge over a port different than the Thunderbolt one, which is why I was so happy to see that both USB Type-C ports support charging on the GPD Win Max. With a dedicated GPU in an enclosure connected to a monitor and a wireless mouse and keyboard, I finally started seeing glimpses of the great hybrid computer this could be. Using an external GPU this way comes with a penalty. Thunderbolt 3 on its current form only allows a fraction of the PCIe bandwidth access that connecting to a motherboard would usually do, which means that there's a limit to how fast you can get stuff from and to the GPU. It is hard to quantify exactly what that means in terms of a performance penalty because this is likely going to affect some parts of the game more than others, but it is still crazy to me that a technology that still enables a very useful GPU expansion on a laptop but is still so importantly flawed, will be sold at such a premium. Still, credit where credit is due. With this thing, the CPU was able to go full power and run some games well docked, that it would otherwise just not function with integrated graphics. This is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, an all-around very heavy game now running through an external GTX 1060. There's a loss here. This game is supposed to be able to do 30 FPS on high on the GPU and on this resolution, and yet in low settings, this struggle is still there. That's the limited bandwidth in action, but hey, it works. I couldn't get this game working on Intel Iris, that's for sure. Not to mention, it can be a heck of a productivity tool. This opens the door to the possibility of using this as one of my main laptops and then being able to plug in an external GPU for editing or rendering, on which it will probably do better than my current laptop. So in summary, but I'm still holding out hope for a Ryzen-based device in the future. This is by far my favorite device from GPD yet. Its controls are so good that it made it impossible for me to return to previous devices, and its CPU power is phenomenal for the small size, but I wish the screen was a higher resolution so I could just use it more as a laptop. It will still likely become a new traveling partner for when travel comes back, but for now it's my preferred way to play Genshin Impact and indie games by far. It is much heavier than past GPD devices, but that is a compromise I'm willing to take for the better cooling and especially for the fantastic controls. Also, I'm not sure how I did not mention this before in the video, but the integrated speakers are killer. Even with the sounds of the fans, they are the best GPD have packed yet. GPD have already been hinting that they're doing some wild stuff with the GPD Wind line that I'm really looking forward to, because they have set a pretty high bar now. although I'm worried that they're being limited by just the state of integrated graphics until AMD makes some progress on those low TDP SoCs, Intel releases more of its new graphics, or just the entire industry starts moving to ARM chips, because if Apple jumps off a cliff, it seems everyone else would. But I think we're still going to have a lot of uses for this sticker. Oh yeah, about that. Look at this thing, doesn't it look neat? Ever wanted to show the world that your laptop or desktop values creative use over settings, that you're a brave soul that just finds a way to play the games that you want on what you have? Then come out at lowspec.shop. Yes, that's an actual URL I bought, isn't that amazing? Where it will direct you to the official Low Spec Inside sticker. It's holographic, it's shiny, it goes well with any computer, and it comes with a free month of Nebula. But wait, I hear you say, I'm not sure I will call my computer low spec. Well, it's not your components what matter, but the intent. But still, I gotcha. Here's the official Low Spec Inside pin. This high-quality accessory goes straight into your bag, your shirt, your jacket, whatever you want, to show the world that PC gaming is way more than just ultra graphics and expensive PCs. And yes, both products come with a free month of Nebula, the streaming service that I'm co-creating with some of the best quality creators in this platform. There you can find all my videos without ads and with extended commentary and original long-form content you won't see anywhere else, like my current in post-production original. And yes, every single item includes a stakeable free Nebula month. Talk about synergy. So you know the deal. Lowspec.shop will redirect you right to its page. I seriously still cannot believe that was a URL I just grabbed. It's kinda fun to say, isn't it? Lowspec.shop.